Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're looking at a story that truly defies belief. We're going to unpack the surreal, honestly terrifying overlap between a massive hit TV crime show and a real-life, highly predatory serial killer. If you've ever thought the truth is stranger and much, much darker than fiction, well, the case of Bill Bradford is absolutely going to prove you right. As we move through this explainer, we're going to see exactly how a man weaponized the culture of ambition, and how decades later a hidden cache of photographs brought his nightmares roaring right back to the surface.
Picture this scenario for a second. It's the summer of 2006. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has just released a massive public poster filled with the faces of unidentified women in an attempt to solve a colossal cold case. Suddenly, the phone rings. And on the other end of the line, it's Eva LaRue, a famous actress starring on the smash hit CBS show CSI Miami. She tells them, "Number 3 in your profile is my sister, my real-life sister." I mean, what a bombshell. A Hollywood actress had literally just identified her own family member in a serial killer's hidden stash of photographs.
And here is where it gets infinitely more bizarre, a total collision of art and life. At the exact same time Eva LaRue made that frantic phone call, she was actively filming a CSI Miami episode called Dark Room. The plot of that specific episode: a rogue amateur photographer targeting and abducting naive girls. Eva actually struggled to get through filming those scenes because, well, she wasn't just acting. Back in the 1980s, she and her sister had actually met Bill Bradford at an amateur photo shoot. The real-life killer had pointed his lens right at them. The script she was reading for television was mirroring the grim reality she had narrowly escaped decades prior.
Moving on to Section 1, The Photographer's Deadly Lure.
$7. Just think about that number for a second. In the early 1980s in Southern California, there was this massive, booming culture of amateur modeling events. Thousands of young girls, dreaming of being discovered, would flock to these open shoots. And what did it take for a guy to gain access to these incredibly vulnerable girls? Anyone with a camera and a $7 entry fee could just walk right in and declare themselves a photographer. There were no background checks, no vetting whatsoever. That $7 fee provided the absolute perfect camouflage for a predator to just blend right in with harmless hobbyists. And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific dynamic at play here. It was all a matter of perspective. To the teenagers, who were naive and starry-eyed, these shoots were a stepping stone to glamorous dreams. They just trusted the adults in the room. But from Bill Bradford's perspective, he wasn't looking for talent. As Eva LaRue's sister later described it, he was like a sniper in a crowd. He used the chaos of these photo shoots to isolate targets, approaching them with promises of private shoots in better lighting. It was basically flypaper for a psychopath.
To really wrap your head around how close so many girls came to losing their lives, consider this chilling anecdote. A girl named Alina was just 12 years old when she went to one of these shoots with her parents. Bradford approached her, charming, clean-cut, and lured her away from the main group into an alley, promising better photos. Thankfully, her dad, Carl, noticed she was missing. He tracked her down and, brilliantly thinking on his feet, just stood right next to Bradford and pretended to be another photographer taking pictures of his daughter. Bradford got agitated, lost his privacy, and stormed off. That quick thinking almost certainly saved a 12-year-old girl's life. Because behind that clean-cut, approachable facade was a monster of the highest order. Just listen to this quote from Cindy Horton, Bradford's ex-wife, who actually met him when she was just 15. "If you gave me a choice, I would rather be in a room with Lucifer and Charles Manson than Bill Bradford." During their 5 years together, Bradford subjected her to horrific abuse, beatings, and torture. He'd regularly come home and brag to her about hurting other women, talking about making them pay. He harbored this deep, vicious hatred for women, and he literally spent his life punishing them.
Let's look at Section 2, the 1984 Desert Murders.
So how did they finally catch him? The detective work here, especially by legendary LAPD detective Jigsaw John, was incredibly meticulous. First, in 1984, police find a mutilated body classified as Jane Doe 60. When they searched Bradford's apartment, detectives spotted a patch of skin removed from Jane Doe's ankle that perfectly matched a tattoo seen in photographs Bradford took of a woman named Sherry Miller. Second, in those photos of Sherry, police notice a very distinct rock formation in the background. So they organize a massive search in the remote Mojave Desert to find that specific rock. And finally, within 100 yards of that rock formation, they don't just find evidence of Sherry's murder, they find the body of 15-year-old Tracy Campbell, Bradford's next-door neighbor, who had vanished days later. He had basically turned the remote desert into his own personal killing field.
Bradford is put on trial for the murders of Sherry Miller and Tracy Campbell, and he completely leans into it.
He fires his lawyers, he cross-examines his own victims. And when the jury ultimately convicts him and sends him to death row, he doesn't show a single ounce of remorse. Instead, he stands up in the courtroom and delivers this bone-chilling taunt to the jury. Think of how many you don't even know about. He wanted the infamy, you know? He wanted them to know that Sherry and Tracy were just the tip of the iceberg.
Which brings us to Section 3, uncovering the secret cache. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how a completely closed case violently rips back open.
Let's track the timeline here for a second. Detectives believe Bradford was actively operating as a killer from 1975 until his arrest in 1984. Upon his arrest, police seized hundreds of his photographs. But when he was sent to death row, those photos just got lost in the archaic, crowded storage systems of the police department. They literally sat in the dark for 22 years. Then, in the summer of 2006, by a complete lucky accident, detectives find an unmarked folder in the back of a filing cabinet, and inside was a shoebox full of pictures of women. And that brings us to this staggering number, 47. Out of the hundreds of photos recovered, forensic artists and detectives curated a list of women they simply could not identify. So the LA Sheriff's Department releases a massive poster board to the public featuring the faces of 47 unknown women. The goal was simple but terrifying. They needed to find out who these women were, and more importantly, they desperately needed to find out if they were still alive.
Moving to Section 4, identifying the unknown women.
The response to that poster was immediate and overwhelming. Former attendees of those 1980s photo shoots started stepping up to piece together the puzzle. An amateur photographer named Larry Gray goes to the police website, checks his old files, and identifies 6 of the women, thankfully all alive and well. A former model named Monty Gabrielle saw the photos and had this sickening realization. Bradford had actually tried to lure her to a solo car magazine shoot out in the desert, but her gut instinct told her to cancel. Because of the public's help, an incredible 39 women from that initial poster were successfully identified.
But, not all the identifications brought relief. The tragic story of Donnie Duhamel really humanizes that initial statistic. In 1978, she was at a bar in Culver City when a man, later identified as Bradford, charmed her with the promise of making her a model. She left her purse and keys, walked out the door, and was never seen by her family again. She left behind 2 young daughters, Lisa and Lori. For decades, they had absolutely no answers. It wasn't until that 2006 poster was released that they saw their mother's face. Dental records eventually matched Donnie to a Jane Doe found in a canyon shortly after she vanished. That poster finally gave her daughters horrific, but entirely necessary, closure.
And that leads us to our final chapter, Section 5, A Killer's Lingering Secrets. So the crucial point here is the sheer, terrifying, manipulative power of this man. It's a surreal dichotomy. On one side, you have his federal appellate lawyer, Darlene Ricker. She spent over 7 years visiting him, exchanging letters, and she insists he's innocent, calling him amusing, funny, and witty. She fully believes she is immune to his con. But on the exact opposite side, you have his own flesh and blood, his daughter, Jodine Larson. Jodine visited him in prison and saw the killer emerge, watching him inappropriately analyze the photos of the victims. She cut him out of her life entirely and publicly stated that her closure would be his execution. It just brilliantly illustrates a psychopath's ability to show you exactly what he wants you to see.
During this renewed investigation, police discovered even more photos, pushing the total number of unidentified women to over 70. They even found a belt buckle near another unidentified body in the desert that Bradford's ex-wife immediately recognized as his. So it leaves us with this haunting question. With scores of newly discovered photos bringing the total to over 70 women, how many more of Bill Bradford's secrets are still buried out there in the desert? How many families are still waiting for a poster to give them closure? It's a really dark question, but it's exactly why digging into these explainers matters. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.